John Carter double-checked his suit seals as the U.S. Valiant approached the massive Galaxian flagship. Through the viewport, he could see the alien vessel, all sharp angles and gleaming metals that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. As the combat engineer for humanity's first contact team, John felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Final systems check complete," he reported, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Engineering team ready for diplomatic transfer." Captain Susan Reeves nodded. "Good work, Carter. Remembered, this meeting determines the future of Earth-Salaxian relations. No pressure." She attempted a smile that didn't reach her eyes. John looked at the other 5 members of the diplomatic team. They had trained for months for this moment. First official face-to-face contact with the Salaxians after 2 years of careful long-distance communication. The aliens had technology far beyond human capabilities, and Earth desperately needed this alliance. "Docking in 3 minutes," announced the ship's eye. John's thoughts drifted to Lisa Bennett back on Earth. His fiancée had helped design parts of his combat suit. "This will keep you safe when I can't," she had said before kissing him goodbye. He touched the small photo of her he kept inside his helmet. The ship shuddered slightly as the docking clamps engaged. "Something's wrong," muttered Dan Ortiz, the weapons officer. "That vibration pattern is irregular." Before John could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. The captain's console lit up with emergency signals. "It's a trap," Captain Reeves shouted. "The Galaxians are powering weapons systems. All hands. Battle stations." The ship rocked violently as the first blast hit. John was thrown against the wall, his training immediately kicking in. He ran toward engineering. They needed shields now. "Carter to bridge. The main shield generator is failing to respond to automatic commands. I need to manually override." "Do it fast, Carter." The captain's voice crackled over the comms. "We've got 3 more human ships under attack." They caught the whole delegation in their trap. John raced through corridors filling with smoke. 2 more blasts rocked the ship, and he heard the horrible sound of metal tearing. Emergency bulkheads began to slam shut throughout the vessel. He reached engineering just as Chief Engineer Paul Winters was trying to reroute power. "The primary couplings are fried," Winters shouted over the noise. "We need to activate the emergency shield system, or we're all dead." John saw the problem immediately. The manual override required someone to go into the reactor chamber, a death sentence once the shields activated. Another explosion rocked the ship. The lights flickered. "Containment breach in 10 seconds. Someone yelled. John made his decision instantly. "Get everyone out of engineering now," he ordered, shoving Winters toward the door. "What are you doing, Carter?" "Saving who I can," John replied, sealing his helmet and overriding the lock to the reactor chamber. He stepped inside as the ship took another devastating hit. Working quickly, he connected the emergency shield generators directly to the reactor core. It would burn out the system, but it would give the crew a chance. "Carter to bridge. Emergency shields coming online. Get as many people to the escape pods as possible." "John, what did you do?" Captain Reeves' voice was filled with dread. The reactor chamber began to glow with deadly radiation. John finished the final connection. "Tell Lisa I'm sorry," he said, activating the system. The shields flared to life, just as a section of the hull near John tore open. The explosive decompression sucked him into space among debris and wreckage. His last conscious thought was of Lisa's face as his damaged suit struggled to compensate for the freezing vacuum. Above him, the battle rage. The Galaxian ships methodically destroyed the human fleet, broadcasting their victory across all channels. The alien commander included footage of John's body tumbling into space. "See how fragile they are," the Galaxian leader announced to the galaxy. "The humans die so easily. They are not worthy of our respect." As John's vital signs flatlined on the Valiant's sensors, Captain Reeves whispered, "He's gone," before ordering the remaining crew to the escape pods. Back on Earth, Lisa Bennett watched the broadcast with horror. When they showed John floating lifeless among the debris, she shook her head in denial. "No," she whispered fiercely. "That's not how his story ends. Cold. Endless cold." That was all John Carter knew as he drifted through the emptiness of space. His body should have died hours after the explosion, yet something kept him alive. The specialized combat suit Lisa had helped design contained more than standard life support systems. Experimental tech, not fully approved by military command, had activated in the moment of crisis. John floated among twisted metal and broken ship parts. His consciousness faded in and out like a weak radio signal. Sometimes he thought he was back on Earth with Lisa. Other times, he relived the moment the Scilaxian ships opened fire. Most of the time, there was nothing but darkness. Inside his damaged suit, microscopic machines worked tirelessly. His neural implants, designed to help engineers interface with complex systems, had triggered emergency protocols. The implants sent the body into deep hibernation while slowly repairing critical damage. Even the suit's designers didn't know it could do this. It was never meant to be tested. 6 months passed. On Earth, humanity reeled from the Scilaxian attacks. After destroying the diplomatic fleet, the aliens had moved quickly, taking over 3 outer colonies within weeks. Their broadcasts filled Earth channels. "Humans are weak," the Scilaxian High Commander would say. "Your bodies break easily. Your minds are simple. You were not made to compete with superior species. Accept your place." Each broadcast showed footage of John's apparent death. He had become a symbol of human fragility to the Scilaxians. In a small apartment in Boston, Lisa Bennett ignored the mandatory curfew warnings flashing on her screens. For months, she had analyzed the debris field data from the U.S. Valiant disaster. Something didn't add up. Come on," she whispered, fingers flying across the keyboard. The simulation ran again, tracking thousands of objects ejected from the destroyed ship. One object didn't behave like debris. It had made tiny course corrections over time. Her colleague, Steve Lawson, looked over her shoulder nervously. "Lisa, you need to stop this." Even if by some miracle John survived the initial explosion, no one could live 6 months in open space. "Look at this power signature." Lisa pointed at a small blip on the screen. "It's minimal but steady. That's not random energy from damaged equipment. That's a regulated system. Or it's your grief making you see patterns that aren't there," Steve said gently. "The memorial service is tomorrow. You should go, say goodbye. Move on." Lisa shook her head. "I'm not crazy, Steve. John's suit had prototype systems I helped build. They were designed to keep the wearer alive in extreme conditions." "Not this extreme," Steve argued. "No one could survive. No one was supposed to survive the plague of 2031 either, but my brother did." Lisa cut him off. "Sometimes the impossible happens." She turned back to her screen. "I need a ship." Steve sighed. "You'll never get clearance. All civilian space travel is restricted since the attacks began." "Then I'll find another way," Lisa said firmly. Meanwhile, in the darkness of space, John's suit picked up a faint signal. His neural implants, now deeply integrated with his nervous system, began to shift from repair to reactivation. For the first time in months, his brain patterns changed from deep hibernation to something closer to sleep. Elsewhere in the sector, Captain Hank Miller of the salvage ship Lucky Break swore as his sensors detected a Scilaxian patrol. "All stop," he ordered his small crew. "Kill all non-essential systems. Let them pass by." As they drifted silently, waiting for the patrol to move on, the ship's sensors picked up something unusual. "Captain," called Ben Watt, the ship's technician. "There's something out there. Not Scilaxian. Looks like human tech." Hank frowned. "Probably just debris from one of their attacks. Is it worth anything?" Ben studied the readings. "Hard to tell, but it's putting out a power signature. Might be valuable tech we could salvage or sell to the resistance." Hank made a quick decision. Once the patrol is gone, we'll grab it and run. Quick in, quick out. Little did they know that their next salvage operation would change the course of the war. The Lucky Break moved slowly toward the floating object. Captain Hank Miller watched from the bridge as his crew prepared the retrieval arm. "What exactly are we looking at, Ben?" Hank asked, squinting at the small shape on the view screen. Then Wyatt adjusted the sensors. "It's a combat suit. Military grade. Pretty banged up, but the power core is still functioning somehow." "Any life signs?" Hank asked without much hope. Ben shook his head. "Nothing clear. There's some kind of electrical activity, but the sensors can't make sense of it. Probably just malfunctioning systems." "Bring it in," Hank ordered. "Carefully. If there's anything useful in that suit, I want it intact." The retrieval arm extended, gently grasping the drifting suit. As it moved toward the ship's cargo bay, the crew gathered to see what they'd found. When they laid the suit on the examination table, everyone fell silent. Despite the damage, they could see it contained a human body. "He's been out there for months," whispered Kate Chen, the ship's medic. "No one survives that long in space, even in a suit." She ran a scanner over the body. Her eyes widened. "Captain, I'm getting some readings. Extremely faint, but there's brain activity." "That's impossible," Hank said, moving closer. As if responding to their voices, the suit's systems suddenly powered up. Lights flickered across the damaged helmet. The crew jumped back. "Holy shit," Ben gasped. "It's activating." The suit's built-in medical system began to speak in a flat, computerized voice. "Emergency reanimation sequence initiated. Host vital signs critical but stable. Requesting medical assistance." "It's he. Alive?" Hank asked in disbelief. Kate ran her scanner again. "Barely. He's in some kind of suspended animation. I've never seen anything like this." "Can you help him?" Hank asked. Kate shook her head. "This is beyond me. But I know someone who might be able to help." 3 days later, the Lucky Break docked at a hidden asteroid base. Dr. Abigail Wright met them at the airlock, her face skeptical, until she saw the readings from the suit. "Get him to my lab, now," she ordered. For 2 weeks, Dr. Wright worked tirelessly. The man in the suit, identified by his dog tags as John Carter of the U.S. Valiant, hung between life and death. "His neural implants have evolved somehow," Dr. Wright explained to Hank. "They've integrated with his nervous system in ways I've never seen before. It's like they're rebuilding him from the inside out." "Will he wake up?" Hank asked. "If he does, he won't be the same," she replied. On the 17th day, John Carter opened his eyes. He saw unfamiliar faces staring down at him. His body felt strange, lighter but stronger. His mind raced with fragmented memories and something else. Data, calculations, information he shouldn't know. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice rough from months of disuse. "You're at Outpost Omega," Dr. Wright answered. "I'm Dr. Abigail Wright. Captain Miller and his crew found you drifting in space." John tried to sit up. Images flooded his mind. The Xalaxian attack, the explosion, the cold of space. "How long?" he asked. "You've been presumed dead for almost 7 months," Dr. Wright said gently. John processed this. Through his enhanced senses, he could detect the power systems of the base, the life support, even the nervous tension in the people around him. "The Xalaxians," he said. "What's happened?" Hank stepped forward. "They've taken 3 colonies. Earth is under blockade. They're using footage of your death as propaganda, showing how weak humans are." John absorbed this. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled slightly. "They think I'm dead," he said. "You were," Dr. Wright corrected, "by any medical definition. No human should have survived what you did." John looked at his hands. He could feel the changes in his body, the new connections in his brain. "Maybe I'm not entirely human anymore," he said quietly. Then, with surprising strength, he stood up. But I'm alive, and they don't know it. Hank studied him. What are you thinking, Carter? I'm thinking, John said, his eyes hardening, that the Xylaxians have a weakness, and I know what it is. Over the next week, John worked with Dr. Wright to understand his new abilities. His neural implants had done more than just save his life. They had changed him. Your body adapted to survive in space, Dr. Wright explained, showing him scans of his brain. These implants were only meant to help engineers interface with ship systems, but they've grown. They're now connected to every part of your nervous system. John nodded. He could feel the difference. When he looked at the base's computers, he didn't just see screens. He sensed the data flowing through them. While I was drifting, John said, my suit collected data. Radiation readings, communication signals, everything. Including information about the Xylaxians. He placed his hand on a computer terminal. To everyone's shock, data began flowing onto the screen without him touching the keyboard. They have a weakness, John continued. Their biology is highly sensitive to a specific radiation frequency. It doesn't harm humans, but it disrupts their neural pathways. Their ships have heavy shielding against it. Hank whistled. That's quite a discovery, Carter. But how do you plan to use it? We're just a salvage crew with one small ship. John turned to him. That might be enough. No one knows I'm alive. We have the element of surprise. 2 days later, the lucky break approached a small Xylaxian outpost on the moon of a gas giant. John wore a modified version of his combat suit, now enhanced by Dr. Wright with special radiation emitters. Remember, Hank told his nervous crew, we go in fast, plant the device, and get out. No heroics. John smiled grimly. I've already died once. I'm not looking to repeat the experience. The small ship slipped past the outpost's outer sensors. John had somehow known exactly where their blind spots were. Once docked at a maintenance port, John moved through the station like a ghost, avoiding patrols with uncanny precision. It's like I can sense them before I see them, he whispered over the comm to Hank, who monitored his progress from the ship. John reached the central control room and placed Dr. Wright's device on the main power conduit. Within minutes, the radiation began to spread through the station's systems. The Xylaxian guards grew disoriented, their movements sluggish. It's working, John reported as he made his way back. They can barely function. The team escaped before any alarm could be raised. By the time the Xylaxians recovered, the lucky break was long gone, and the outpost communication array had been reprogrammed to send false reports that everything was normal. News of the raid spread through human resistance channels. More attacks followed. A Xylaxian supply depot found empty. A patrol ship disabled without explanation. A prison camp's gates mysteriously opening in the night. Each time, survivors reported seeing a figure in a battle-scarred suit who moved with impossible speed and seemed to know exactly where to strike. They began to call him the Ghost. On Earth, Lisa Bennett watched reports of these attacks with growing excitement. The pattern, the tactics, they reminded her of John. When she plotted the locations of each attack, they formed a pattern only she would recognize. The constellation she and John had seen on their first date. He's alive, she whispered to herself. I knew it. She took her findings to Admiral Frank Cooper, one of the few high-ranking officers to survive the initial attack. With all due respect, Admiral, I believe John Carter survived, she said, showing him her data. And I think he's behind these attacks. The Admiral studied her evidence with a skeptical expression. Bennett, I was there when Carter was blown into space. No one could have survived that. Then how do you explain these attacks? The tactics, the target selection, it's all consistent with John's approach. And look at this pattern. Admiral Cooper frowned at the star map. Even if by some miracle he survived, how would he know these Xylaxian weaknesses? How could he get past their security? I don't know, Lisa admitted, but I'm going to find out. I need a ship, sir. The Admiral considered her for a long moment. You always were too stubborn for your own good, Bennett, just like Carter. He sighed. I can't officially sanction this, but there's a scout ship leaving for the outer colonies tomorrow. I'll make sure your name is on the crew list. As Lisa prepared for her journey across the galaxy, John planned his next strike, unaware that the woman he loved was coming to find him. Admiral Cooper watched from the command center as reports of another Xalaxian facility going offline came in. This was the 5th attack in 3 weeks. The resistance was growing bolder, inspired by the mysterious ghost who seemed able to strike anywhere. Sir, we've received a transmission from the scout ship Horizon, a young officer reported. Ms. Bennett requests a secure channel. The Admiral nodded. On screen, Lisa's face appeared, her eyes bright with excitement. Admiral, I've tracked the ghost to the Zeta system. We picked up his signature radiation trail after the mining colony attack. Have you made contact? Cooper asked. Not yet, but I'm certain it's John. The radiation signature matches elements from his suit design. Be careful, Bennett. Even if it is Carter, he's been out there alone for months. He might not be the man you remember. Lisa's expression hardened. I'll find him, sir. Bennett out. The Horizon entered the asteroid field where the ghost's trail ended. Lisa scanned for any sign of a ship or base. After hours of searching, they detected a faint power signature coming from within a large asteroid. That has to be it, Lisa told the captain. Can we dock nearby? Before the captain could answer, the ship's systems suddenly went dark. Emergency lighting flickered on. What's happening? Lisa asked. We've been hacked, the captain said in disbelief. Someone's taken control of our ship remotely. The Horizon moved on its own, guiding itself toward the asteroid. A hidden door opened in the rock face, and the ship was pulled inside a camouflaged hangar bay. As the airlock opened, Lisa found herself face to face with Captain Hank Miller and his crew, all holding weapons. Who are you and why are you following us? Hank demanded. Lisa stood her ground. My name is Lisa Bennett. I'm looking for John Carter. A voice spoke from behind Hank. Lisa. The crew parted, revealing John. He looked different, stronger, his eyes more intense, with fine scars across his face. But it was him. Lisa ran forward, embracing him fiercely. I knew you were alive. I knew it. John held her tightly. How did you find me? I recognized your attack pattern. You always did like the Big Dipper. John smiled. I hoped you might. Later, in a small command center inside the asteroid, John explained everything to Lisa. His survival, the changes to his body, the Galaxian weakness. We've been hitting small targets, he said, but it's not enough. The Galaxians are still too strong. Lisa pulled out a data drive. I've been working on something too. Your neural implants were partly my design, remember? I've analyzed the data from your attacks. There's a pattern to how the radiation affects their systems. She showed him her findings. Their main fleet has triple shielding against this radiation, but there's a central communication hub on their command ship. If we could get to it, we could broadcast the radiation frequency through their own network. John finished. It would affect their entire fleet at once. Exactly. But we'd need to get aboard their command ship first. John's eyes met hers. That's suicide. Not for a ghost, she countered. Their planning was interrupted when Dr. Wright rushed in. John, Admiral Cooper is requesting to speak with you. He says it's urgent. On screen, the Admiral looked grave. Carter, I can hardly believe it's you. It's me, sir. Mostly. I don't know how you survived, but we need you. The Galaxians are planning something big. Our intelligence suggests they're moving their command ship to Earth orbit. They're going to make an example of us. John exchanged looks with Lisa. When? 3 days. We're gathering what's left of our fleet, but it won't be enough. John squared his shoulders. It might not have to be. We have a plan. Sir, care to share it with your commanding officer? Cooper asked. With respect, Admiral, I've been declared dead. I don't technically have a commanding officer anymore. For the first time in months, Cooper smiled. Fair enough, Ghost. What do you need from us? John looked at Lisa, then back at the screen. A distraction. And away onto their command ship. Consider it done, Cooper said. And Carter, it's damn good to see you again. As the transmission ended, John turned to Lisa. Ready to save the world. Lisa squeezed his hand. Always. The massive Xylaxian command ship entered Earth orbit like a dark cloud blocking the sun. Smaller warships surrounded it in a protective formation. On the main view screen of the Resistance base, Admiral Cooper watched with grim determination. All ships in position, reported his second-in-command. Ready on your order, sir. Cooper nodded. Remember, we're not trying to win this battle. We just need to keep their attention while Carter's team gets aboard. Nearby, John checked his equipment one last time. His modified combat suit now included Dr. Wright's radiation emitters and upgrades based on Lisa's research. Beside him, Lisa adjusted her own gear. You don't have to come, John said quietly. This is going to be dangerous. Lisa gave him a look. I spent 7 months believing you were dead. I'm not letting you out of my sight again. Captain Hank Miller approached with his crew member Ryan Parker, a former Special Forces soldier. The ship is ready, Hank said, small enough to slip through their sensors during the battle. John shook Hank's hand. Thank you for everything, Captain. Just make it count, Hank replied. And try not to die again. Admiral Cooper's voice came over the comm. Carter, we're about to start our attack. Good luck. The human fleet emerged from hiding, firing everything they had at the Xylaxian ships. The aliens responded immediately, their superior weapons lighting up space. While the battle raged, Hank's small ship slipped between the fighting vessels, its signature masked by the weapons fire. They approached the underside of the massive command ship, finding a maintenance airlock. This is where we part ways, Hank told John. We'll keep the ship ready for your return. John nodded. If we're not back in 2 hours, leave without us. John, Lisa, and Ryan exited through the airlock, using magnetic boots to walk along the hull until they reached a service entrance. John placed his hand on the access panel, his neural implants connecting directly with the ship's systems. I can feel their security protocols, he whispered. They're complex but familiar. After a moment, the door slid open. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a dimly lit corridor. The communication hub should be 3 levels up, Lisa said, checking her scanner. We need to hurry. They moved through the ship-like shadows, John's enhanced senses allowing them to avoid patrols. When they couldn't avoid contact, Ryan's combat skills proved valuable, taking down Xylaxian guards silently. They were 2 corridors away from the hub when alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. They've detected us, Ryan said, readying his weapon. John shook his head. No, it's something else. The battle outside. They reached a view screen showing the fight. The human fleet was being decimated, but they had managed to damage several Xylaxian vessels. We need to move faster, John urged. They reached the entrance to the communication hub, but found it heavily guarded. 6 Xylaxian soldiers stood watch, their weapons ready. We can't take them all without alerting the whole ship, Ryan whispered. John studied the guards, then looked at a nearby control panel. I have an idea. He placed his hand on the panel, his implants interfacing with it. Suddenly, the lights in the corridor went out. In the confusion, they attacked. Ryan and Lisa took down 3 guards while John moved with inhuman speed, disabling the others before they could raise an alarm. When the emergency lights came on, all 6 guards lay unconscious. That was impressive, Ryan said. They entered the hub, a vast room filled with screens and control stations. Xylaxian technicians turned in surprise as they entered. Get the door, John shouted as he rushed toward the main console. Ryan sealed the door while Lisa covered the technicians with her weapon. John placed both hands on the central system, his eyes closing in concentration. Stop him, shouted a voice from the back of the room. A tall Selaxian stepped forward, his uniform marking him as a high-ranking officer. "I know you," he said, staring at John. "You died. I watched you die." John looked up, recognizing the Selaxian High Commander who had led the attack on the Valiant. "I got better," John replied, continuing to work. The commander lunged forward, but Lisa fired, forcing him back. "Hurry, John." "Almost there," John said, his mind deep in the Selaxian systems. "I can see the entire network now. It connects to every ship, every base." The commander laughed coldly. "Even if you broadcast your radiation, our ships are shielded." John smiled. "I'm not targeting your ships. I'm targeting you." The commander's eyes widened as he realized John's plan. "You can't." Before he could finish, John activated the program. Throughout the ship, Selaxians began to stagger as the carefully calibrated radiation frequency flooded through their own communication devices. Throughout the massive command ship, Selaxians dropped to their knees. The radiation frequency that John had discovered during his time in space was now flooding through their communication devices, disrupting their neural pathways. The High Commander struggled to remain standing. "What have you done?" he gasped. "I'm showing the galaxy the truth," John replied. His hand still connected to the system, he did something unexpected. Instead of simply disabling the Selaxians, he began broadcasting. Every screen on the ship, on all Selaxian vessels, and on every planet under their control suddenly showed John's face. "My name is John Carter. The Selaxians told you I died. They showed you my body floating in space. They said humans were weak." As he spoke, images flashed across the screens. His survival in the void, his recovery, his transformation. The memories flowed directly from his neural implants into the broadcast. "But they were wrong," John continued. "They attacked us because their predictions showed that humans would eventually surpass them. They feared us." The High Commander lunged at John in desperation, but Ryan stepped between them, knocking the alien back. Lisa worked frantically at another console. "John, the radiation is affecting their ship controls. The fleet is starting to drift. We need to get out of here." John nodded but kept broadcasting. "To every species suffering under Selaxian rule, now is your chance. They are vulnerable. Their weakness is this frequency." He transmitted the exact radiation signature that affected the Selaxian biology. "John, we have to go," Lisa shouted as the ship shuddered around them. Explosions echoed through distant corridors. John disconnected from the system. The moment he did, the High Commander made one final attempt, drawing a hidden weapon. He fired at John, but Lisa pushed him aside. The shot grazed her arm. Ryan fired back, hitting the commander squarely. The alien fell, his eyes fixed on John with hatred and disbelief. "You should have made sure I was dead," John told him. They fought their way back through the ship, which was now in chaos. Selaxian crew members stumbled in confusion or lay unconscious. Others who had been shielded from the radiation tried to stop them, but Ryan's combat skills and John's enhanced abilities cleared their path. When they reached the maintenance airlock, they found it guarded by Selaxian soldiers. A fierce firefight erupted. "We're pinned down," Ryan shouted over the weapon's fire. John looked at Lisa's injured arm, then at the narrowing path to escape. He made a decision. "I'll draw their fire. When I do, run for the airlock." Lisa grabbed his arm. "We go together or not at all." Before John could argue, the guard suddenly fell, shot from behind. Captain Hank Miller stood there, grinning. "Thought you might need a hand," he said. They raced to the small ship and detached from the command vessel just as secondary explosions began rippling across its hull. As they sped away, they watched the massive Selaxian fleet falling into disarray. Some ships drifted aimlessly. Others were being captured by suddenly emboldened resistance forces. On the comm, Admiral Cooper's voice was filled with wonder. "Carter, what did you do?" The entire Selaxian command structure is collapsing. I showed them that humans don't stay down, John replied, watching as the massive command ship began to break apart. From across the galaxy, reports flooded in. On planets under Selaxian control, the subjugated species were rising up. The vast empire that had seemed invincible was crumbling in hours. 3 weeks later, John stood beside Lisa on a balcony overlooking the rebuilt human colony on Mars. His arm was around her waist, her head on his shoulder. "What happens now?" she asked. John looked up at the stars. The neural implants that had saved and changed him continued to evolve. He could sense more than ever, understand more than seemed humanly possible. "Now we rebuild," he said, "and we make sure no one underestimates humanity again." In the distance, ships from a dozen different species were landing, coming to meet with the humans who had freed them from Selaxian rule. At their head would be the man the galaxy now knew by many names: the Ghost, the Survivor, the human who stood back up. John smiled at Lisa, ready for what comes next. She kissed him softly. Always. Together, they walked toward the future, leading a humanity that would never be written off again.